Tourism is strong and different. Health and education has become a new pillar of the business and the economy. And property construction is back, but not at the same level as we were in 2007. We now also have world-class facilities in the sporting arenas. In today's discussion, we'll be covering four major areas: the residential marketplace, residential development marketplace, obviously tourism and construction, and also the commercial sector. We'll start with the residential marketplace. Many years ago, I was fortunate to attend a lunch by a Gold Coast property identity, Max Christmas, which some of you around may know. And he explained the Gold Coast property market in a very simple manner to me. He said that if you sell half the house for twice the price in Sydney, and you come to the Gold Coast and buy twice the house for half the price on the Gold Coast, you know you're in a pretty strong place when you're in the city. And that's where we are right now. If we look into southeast Queensland, the number of apartments that are underway are growing. With the Lord Mayor here, I thought it was important that we also mention Brisbane. Brisbane has received a lot of press recently about their marketplace, and I think that with a significant population of about 2.2 million people and a stable growth across the economy and population, I think Brisbane will be okay. But I do suspect, and our research supports, that a number of the projects that are on the drawing board for 2018 might occur. The Gold Coast, if we look at our hometown here, the Gold Coast has a population of about 600,000 people. And you can see by this graph that the number of developments that are going on is nowhere near the size of Brisbane. The reason that we see that the Gold Coast also has not occurred at the same level of development is purely because of our debt funding issue. The banks, the big four banks, have not been lending in this market, and that in turn is causing the numbers to flow. The high density development that is prominent really sits around the light rail spine, and that's where we will continue to see growth in our market. I believe, and the statistics agree, that the Gold Coast is very well placed to capture this residential investment. We currently have very, very low vacancy rates of about 1.7%. The yields on residential apartments are the highest on all East Coast cities. And first homeowners from southern states are coming to the Gold Coast to acquire because the entry point is significantly less. The Gold Coast is very affordable buying in the residential sector. Moving into the residential development market, you will see that this graph identifies the volume of sales that occurred in any quarter. It clearly identifies that there has been significant activity since 2014, which also coincides in a 6-month window where the Australian banks were very active again in lending to developers. This has subsequently stopped. Turnover of sites are still at historically low areas, and if you consider that from 2015 to 2017 there were three site sales above 50 million, the majority of the activity in this period of time had been taken up in those lumpy acquisitions. On the right-hand side, we have a photograph of a property we're currently marketing just directly east of Pacific Fair. It's a 1.1 hectare site, and with the current town plan that Councillor Caldwell sits over, this site has gone from what would at most be a 30-level apartment building to a development now that looks like 3 residential towers, potentially a hotel, and also a commercial building sitting on top of a retail podium. The light rail spine has identified and has given the opportunity for higher density living close to the beach. Development. An interesting fact when you start looking at the Australian development site sales. as a nation, over 66% of all development sites are sold to foreign investors and developers. If we step back into southeast Queensland and look up to Brisbane, about 50% of sites were sold in 2016 to foreign developers. And then to the Gold Coast, at the same period of time, only 42% were sold to foreign investment and development groups. While the city's enjoyed a long and very comfortable relationship with foreign investors from Southeast Asia and now China, we still have a long way to go in terms of their attention to this marketplace. Tourism and accommodation. It is a really exciting part of our marketplace. It's a maturing tourism market that we're currently in. It's still one of the major drivers within our city from both domestic and international tourism. These figures are based as of March of 2017, with the total visitor numbers coming to the Gold Coast is circa $5 million and an increase, 5 million people, and an increase of over 8%. Visitor nights continue to improve, not at the same rate, but circa 4%. And the domestic market has also had a major impact on these numbers. So what that is really saying is, whilst we're enjoying uplift from our foreign tourism, also the domestic market is still very focused on the Gold Coast. The third graph on the right is expenditure. And this was a little strange when I saw these numbers. You'll see expenditure from the domestic visitors is up by 3.5%, yet international visitors down by 0.3%. I suppose the only thing that we could put to that is the domestic market is enjoying an uplift across the country, where the Chinese market we think is still the first wave and therefore probably a little more budget conscious than previous foreign visitors. When looking at the hotel market continues with strong occupancy across all of our major hotels. The average occupancy is sitting about 72%, and there is an urgent need for new hotels within this city. There has not been a new hotel completed since the Hilton Surfers Paradise, and that's probably about 7 years now. There are two currently under construction, the one across the road being Star Casino, and obviously one of the highest profile being Jewel. There are multiple DAs that are in council that have been approved. We are just hopeful that some of those start in the very near future. And if tourism experts can be believed, the trend of inbound passengers will continue, and we will see a significant shortage of accommodation, hotel accommodation, in the next 4 to 5 years. It's an area that really needs significant investment, and we are very, very hopeful that this will occur. There has been a change in our visitors' expectations coming to the Gold Coast, both domestically and internationally. They are looking for more than just the worlds. They're looking for more than just Movie World, Dream World and SeaWorld. Whilst they'll always have a place and they are such a strong driver of tourism, there is a need for more sophisticated areas. One that we have clearly noticed has been the change to retail and retail entertainment. And with the upgrades recently of Pacific Fair and Robina to become world-class facilities, people are putting those on their agenda or on their schedule for the day. Another area that we think there will be an opportunity post-games is for sporting tourism. Anyone that was here on the Gold Coast last weekend would have seen what sporting tourism looks like. The Gold Coast Marathon was won and run, and about 27 athletes participated across the globe, myself included, and I've still got very sore feet. The infrastructure behind the Commonwealth Games will allow the city to host major sporting events, and this will be one of the key drivers in the continual growth in this sector. The commercial office market. The city's office market has always been the barometer of the health of the city. At the peak of the GFC, vacancies were sitting around 24%. We're currently at 14% and falling rapidly. Our research indicates that by the first quarter of 2018, we'll be sub 10% in office vacancy. We've also seen a growth in tenancy sizes from 150 to 200 square metres. And on a national basis, whilst that is small, it's significant for the Gold Coast. To put this in perspective, that every 50 square metres that is leased, it effectively equates to 4 new jobs. And therefore, we see this is a major factor to indicate how strong this economy is going. One of the other important problems that we see, similar to the hotel industry, there is no new construction since 2009, and there is very little planned. The Gold Coast is really a small to medium enterprise-driven marketplace. And unlike other major capital cities, such as Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, about a third of our office market is strata, and about 80% of that is owner-occupied by self-managed super funds and individual businesses. Again, we look for stability in every one of our marketplaces, and when a third of your market is owner-occupied, it adds stability to the entire sector. We now move on to the commercial investment marketplace. In the last 3 years, every major A-grade office tower in the city has sold, with over 12 other buildings sold, which have been transacted over $5 million. This is the most active period since about 2006, 5 or 6, and the key reasons behind the investment market looking to the city is obviously because of the tenant growth and stability that adds. But in comparison to our capital markets, the Gold Coast is a very attractive acquisition, with most buildings being acquired below replacement cost, and also yields between 1 and 1.5 basis points better than their competitors. The buyer profiles have changed. They are now, for our major buildings, syndicators and private and small end funds, together with the major and high net individuals active in the $5 million market space. So in summary, where to from here? The residential market, it is undervalued, and with low vacancy rates and high yields, it is a strengthening market. Residential development, again, limited new supply and no concern whatsoever of oversupply, which is very unlike the Gold Coast. Clearly, a strong focus on density developments around the light rail spine, and that will continue into the future given the current planning. This is now a very stable marketplace. In fact, it's in shortage. The commercial sector, the tourism sector, my apologies, the commercial sector, growth in occupancy, no new supply, growth in occupier sizes, which effectively means growth in employment, and strong investor demand, chasing very attractive yields. Our tourism and accommodation, both domestically and internationally, visitors continue to grow. There is a shortage of hotels being developed. Visitors are now seeking more than just the traditional beach, SeaWorld, Movie World. They're looking for more sophisticated tourism areas to visit. This is a strengthening marketplace. So, in summary, where to from here? We think this is a positive growth phase for the Gold Coast. It has strong fundamentals based on population and employment and a much wider economy than, say, 10 years ago. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. There is now a break from proceedings to allow for lunch to be served, and afterward, Lucy will be back on stage to introduce the panel and start the discussions. Thank you.